I answered my door to find my arranged family standing there after 12 years of silence. My brother smirked while my sister crossed her arms. "You don't have a family," my father said coldly. "We're taking the house." Behind them stood a real estate agent with paperwork. I felt my heart racing as memories of their abandonment flooded back when I lost everything during the recession and they turned their backs on me. Without a word, I reached for my phone and dialed 911, surprising them all. Family was everything to me once. Growing up in our middle-class Portland neighborhood, I believed we were unbreakable. My father, William, ran a moderately successful construction company, and we lived comfortably in a colonial-style home with a wraparound porch where we'd gather for Sunday brunches. My mother had passed away when I was in college, breast cancer that took her far too quickly. But my father, brother Derek, and sister Amanda remained close, or so I thought. By age 32, I had built what I considered a solid life. After graduating with my marketing degree, I worked my way up at Tech Forward, a growing software company. My corner office overlooked the Willamette River, and my team respected me. I paid my mortgage on time, contributed to my 401k, and even managed to take vacations to places like Maui and the Grand Canyon. I was the first person in our family to earn a six-figure salary, something my father mentioned frequently at family gatherings, his voice swelling with pride. "That's our Janice," he would say, clinking glasses, the smart one. Then 2010 happened. The recession hit our industry hard and rumors of layoffs circulated through Tech Forward's sleek hallways. Despite working 80-hour weeks and bringing in 2 major clients, my position was eliminated during the 3rd round of cuts. I still remember my boss Martha's face, genuinely pained as she delivered the news. "You've done nothing wrong," she said, sliding the separation package across her desk. "We're cutting the entire division." I wasn't worried initially. I had savings, decent references, and marketable skills. I'd find something quickly, I thought. My family would support me through this temporary setback. The first hint that something was wrong came during our monthly family dinner at my father's house. I'd been unemployed for 6 weeks, and the constant rejection emails were affecting my confidence. I needed encouragement, maybe some networking connections. "Still no job?" Derek asked as he heaped mashed potatoes onto his plate. My brother had followed my father into construction, working as his right-hand man. "Not even an interview. The market's tough right now," I explained. "But I have 3 applications out to promising leads." "You know," Amanda chimed in, swirling her wine. "My friend Jessica lost her job last year and was working again in 2 weeks. She said she couldn't afford to be picky. My sister worked as a dental hygienist, a job she'd held since community college. She'd never faced professional uncertainty a day in her life." "I'm not being picky," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Companies aren't hiring marketing directors right now." "Then be something else," my father interjected. "No use sitting around collecting unemployment." His words stung. I wasn't collecting unemployment. I was actively job searching every day. I was networking, updating my resume, taking additional certification courses. The conversation spiraled downward from there. "Maybe you weren't as good at your job as you thought," Derek suggested with a shrug. "People who want to work find work," Amanda added. When I admitted I was concerned about making next month's mortgage payment, my father's response shattered me. "That's your problem, not ours," he said flatly, cutting his steak. "We all have bills." I left dinner early that night, driving home in tears, but the true betrayal was still to come. 2 days later, while scrolling through Facebook, I saw photos that knocked the wind from me. My family at my cousin Tyler's birthday celebration, an event I hadn't been invited to. There were dozens of pictures, my father carving the turkey, Derek and his wife playing charades, Amanda's kids opening gifts. They were laughing, celebrating, living their lives without me. Scrolling deeper, I found more evidence. A family trip to the coast, a backyard barbecue, movie nights, each event a deliberate exclusion. When I called my father to confront him, his response was chillingly casual. "We didn't think you'd want to come considering your situation," he said. "Besides, Tyler's party was at that new restaurant downtown. Pretty expensive place. So you thought I couldn't afford a dinner?" I asked, incredulous. "Well, you just said you can't make your mortgage." The conversation deteriorated from there. My sister got on the line, telling me they were embarrassed by my unemployment. Derek added that the family didn't want to waste resources on someone who couldn't get their act together. My father delivered the final blow. "Call us when you fixed your life, Janice, we're not carrying you." The line went dead, and so did my relationship with the people I had trusted most in the world. Just when I needed them, their emotional support, if nothing else, they had deemed me unworthy of even their time. I didn't know then that it would be 12 long years before I would see any of them again, or that when they finally returned, it wouldn't be with apologies, but with demands. The 6 months following my family's rejection were the darkest of my life. My savings evaporated rapidly between mortgage payments, utilities, and the bare minimum of groceries. I sold my furniture piece by piece. First the designer couch, then the bedroom set, finally even the kitchen table. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter, calculating each penny with increasing desperation. By month 4, I couldn't make the mortgage payment. By month 5, I was selling my clothes on consignment and had cancelled my phone service. By month 6, after the third eviction notice, I packed what little remained of my possessions into my Honda Civic and vacated the house I'd worked so hard to buy. For 3 weeks I lived in my car, parking in different Walmart lots each night, using the store bathroom to wash up each morning. I applied for jobs from library computers, everything from marketing positions to retail work to dog walking. Nothing came through. My professional references were from a company that no longer existed after a merger. My employment gap grew longer. My appearance suffered from living rough. Each interview became more difficult to secure and easier to fail. The Pacific Northwest winter was setting in, bringing relentless rain that drummed against my car roof each night as I tried to sleep in the reclined driver's seat, wrapped in the only coat I hadn't sold. I was down to $73 and change when my prepaid cell phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Janice Marshall?" An elderly woman's voice asked. Yes, I answered, my voice from disuse. "This is Melaine, a nurse at Sunset Care Home. I'm calling about your great-aunt Ruth Williams. She's asking for you." Great-aunt Ruth, I barely knew the woman. She was my mother's aunt, a shadowy relative who sent Christmas cards but whom I'd only met twice at family funerals. She lived somewhere in eastern Oregon, I recalled. "I'm afraid she doesn't have much time," Melaine continued. "She's been asking if you could visit." I looked at my gas gauge hovering just above empty, counted my remaining cash. "I'll be there," I said. The journey to the small town of Millerville took nearly my last dollar. When I arrived at Sunset Care Home, the receptionist gave my unwashed appearance a skeptical look before directing me to room 217. Aunt Ruth was tiny in her hospital bed. Her white hair fanned across the pillow, skin translucent with age and illness, but her eyes, bright blue like my mother's had been, lit up when I entered. "Janice," she said, "you look terrible." I laughed for the first time in months, a rusty sound. "Nice to see you too, Aunt Ruth. Sit." She patted the bed. "And tell me everything, the truth, mind you, I'm too old for anything else." So I told her about losing my job, my home, my dignity, about my family's abandonment. As I spoke, tears fell freely, releasing months of pent-up grief and shame. When I finished, Aunt Ruth's face was a thundercloud. "Disgraceful," she muttered. "Your mother would be ashamed of them. Not of you, girl, of them." Over the next 3 weeks I visited daily. The nurses let me use the shower in an empty resident room. I slept in my car in the parking lot. During the days I sat with Aunt Ruth, listening to stories about my mother's childhood, about Ruth's life as a school teacher, about her late husband, Frank, who died 20 years earlier. "I never had children," she told me one afternoon. "That was my one regret. Frank wanted them, but it wasn't in the cards for us." She asked about my career, offering surprisingly insightful questions about digital marketing strategies. She had me read the news to her and discuss politics with unexpected vigor. Despite her failing body, her mind remained sharp. One evening, as I was preparing to leave, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "William never visits," she said, referring to my father. "None of them do, haven't in years." "They're busy," I offered weakly, still making excuses for them. "No," she shook her head. "They're selfish, always were. Your mother was the good one like you." I didn't know how to respond. "I know what they did to you," she continued. "Throwing you away when things got hard, that's not family." 2 days later, Aunt Ruth slipped into unconsciousness. I was holding her hand when she took her final breath the following morning. I wept not just for her passing, but for the unexpected kindness she'd shown me when I needed it most. 3 days after the small funeral service, which none of my immediate family attended despite my calls informing them, I sat in the office of Martin Greaves, Aunt Ruth's attorney. "Miss Marshall," he began, adjusting his glasses, "your aunt made some changes to her will shortly before her passing. She was of sound mind, I can assure you." He slid a document across the desk. "She's left you her house and remaining savings. It's not a fortune. About $48,000 in an investment account, but the house is paid off. No mortgage." I stared at him in disbelief. "There must be some mistake. We barely knew each other." "No mistake." Martin smiled gently. "She was quite clear. Said you were the only one who came when she called, the only true family she had left." I left his office in a daze, clutching keys to a house I'd never seen and paperwork for an account I'd never expected. Driving to the address listed, I found a modest 2-bedroom craftsman on a quiet street lined with elm trees. The paint was peeling and the garden overgrown, but it had good bones. It had potential, like me, perhaps. As I unlocked the front door and stepped into the musty silence, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Grief for Aunt Ruth, gratitude for her generosity, and a strange sense of determination. For the first time in months I had a foundation again, a place to stand, a chance to rebuild. I sat on the dusty floor of what would become my new living room and allowed myself to cry one last time for everything I'd lost. Then I stood up, opened the windows to let fresh air circulate through the house, and began to plan my next steps. Aunt Ruth had given me more than property. She'd given me possibility. I would not waste it. 2 years can change everything. By my 35th birthday, I had transformed both Aunt Ruth's house and my life almost beyond recognition. The first 6 months had been devoted to basic survival and making the house livable. I painted every wall myself, sanded and refinished the hardwood floors, and learned basic plumbing from YouTube videos. The small inheritance allowed me to replace the ancient water heater and repair the leaking roof. Every improvement was done with careful budgeting, stretching each dollar while I simultaneously rebuilt my professional life. Starting over in a small town with no connections was harder than I'd anticipated. My impressive corporate resume meant little here, and my employment gap raised eyebrows. I began by offering free marketing consultations to local businesses. Determined to establish myself, my first paying client was Mike's Hardware, where the owner took a chance on my suggestion to improve his local search rankings and social media presence. When his business increased 15% in 3 months, word spread. I worked from a desk in Ruth's former bedroom, converted now to a home office. Gradually, my client list grew from 1 to 5 to 12. I named my fledgling business Phoenix Marketing, a reminder of my own rise from the ashes. My next-door neighbor, Betty Williams, became my first real friend in Millerville. At 78, she initially brought over a welcome pie, then stayed to chat for 3 hours. A retired librarian with no children of her own, Betty was sharp-witted and kind-hearted. She began inviting me for Sunday dinners, introducing me to other neighbors, and generally adopting me as the granddaughter she never had. "You're putting down roots," she observed one evening as we sat on her porch swing. "That's good. This town needs fresh blood and new ideas." "I'm trying," I admitted. "Some days are still hard." "Of course they are," she patted my hand. "You lost your family twice. Once when they abandoned you, and again when you finally accepted they were never who you thought they were." Betty's insight was uncomfortably accurate. I had stopped trying to contact my father, brother, and sister months ago. Each unanswered call and text had only reopened wounds. Instead, I focused on building my business and making this house truly mine. It was during a renovation of the basement that I discovered the box. I was clearing out decades of accumulated junk when I found a metal filing box tucked behind old Christmas decorations. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom. Classic Aunt Ruth, practical to the end. Inside were neatly labeled folders containing birth certificates, insurance policies, and property documents. But beneath these, I found a folder labeled simply William. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a promissory note dated 20 years earlier, signed by my father. He had borrowed $50,000 from Aunt Ruth, promising to repay the loan with interest within 5 years. According to Ruth's meticulous records, he had never paid back a penny. Attached was a letter Ruth had written but apparently never sent. William, it has been 7 years since I loaned you money to save your business. You promised repayment in 5. I have not received any payment nor heard from you since you cashed the check. Your sister would be ashamed. I am cutting contact until you fulfill your obligations to me. Ruth Williams. I sat on the dusty basement floor, stunned. This explained why my father had kept us away from Aunt Ruth for years, claiming she was difficult and not worth the trouble. He owed her money he never intended to repay. Digging deeper into the box, I found more revelations. A bundle of letters from my mother to Aunt Ruth, spanning the years before her illness. In them, she confided concerns about my father's financial decisions, his controlling nature, his frequent anger when questioned. My mother had portrayed a marriage far different from the happy partnership I'd believed in as a child. In one of the final letters dated a year before her diagnosis, my mother wrote, "Ruth, I worry what will happen to the children if something happens to me. William means well, but he sees them as extensions of himself. Janice especially worries me. She's so eager to please him to earn his approval. I fear he'll punish her someday for becoming her own person." My mother's words were prophetic. When I had established my own success, built a life independent of my father's influence, then lost it, he had indeed punished me by withdrawal of love and support. The rejection wasn't just about my unemployment, it was about control. These revelations shifted something fundamental in my understanding of my family. What I had experienced wasn't an anomaly triggered by my job loss, it was consistent with patterns established long before. My father's treatment of Aunt Ruth mirrored his treatment of me. My siblings had followed his lead. As I carefully returned the documents to their folders, my phone chimed with a text message. The name on the screen shocked me. Amanda, hey sis. Heard you're living in Aunt Ruth's old place. How big is it? Any plans to sell? After 2 years of silence, this was her first communication. Not concern for my welfare, not an apology, but an inquiry about property. I didn't respond. That night I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies dance across the yard I'd painstakingly restored. For the first time I felt truly at peace with the severing of my family ties. I was building something new here. A business, a home, a life based on my own terms. What my father, Derek, and Amanda thought no longer mattered. I was no longer the desperate, heartbroken woman living in her car. I was becoming someone stronger, someone who understood that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you need. Little did I know that my newfound peace would be short-lived. My family wasn't done with me yet. 5 years after inheriting Aunt Ruth's house, I barely recognized my own life. Phoenix Marketing had grown from a one-woman operation, run from a spare bedroom, into a legitimate agency, with 7 employees, and an office downtown. We specialized in helping small businesses compete against national chains, leveraging digital strategies to build local customer bases. The house had evolved alongside my business. What had once been a shabby craftsman with peeling paint was now a beautifully restored home with a wraparound porch and gardens that drew compliments from passers-by. I'd extended the kitchen, added a sunroom off the back, and converted the attic into a cozy reading nook. Every corner reflected my personal touch, a far cry from the sterile magazine perfect home I'd lost years ago. My social circle had expanded beyond Betty to include a tight-knit group of friends: Sarah from the local bookstore, Miguel and his husband David who ran the cafe downtown, and Tricia, a single mother who'd been my 3rd client and was now my business partner. We had weekly dinner rotations, holiday traditions, and inside jokes. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was a family of choice that proved more reliable than blood had ever been. Local Business Monthly featured Phoenix Marketing in their September issue, calling us Millerville's comeback success story. The article detailed our growth, innovative strategies, and commitment to revitalizing Main Street businesses. My photo appeared on page 3, showing me at my desk, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by campaign materials for our newest client. The magazine had been on newsstands for exactly 2 days when the email arrived. "Janice, it's been too long. Saw your article. Congrats on the business success. Would love to reconnect. Coffee sometime, Derek." My brother's message sat in my inbox for 3 days while I debated whether to respond. 7 years of complete silence, and now he wanted to reconnect just as my professional success was publicly acknowledged. The timing seemed suspicious at best. Eventually, curiosity won out. I agreed to meet Derek at Cornerstone Cafe, Miguel and David's place, where I'd have friendly faces nearby if things went south. I spotted my brother immediately when he walked in. At 41, Derek looked older than his years, thinner than I remembered, with new lines around his eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. He wore an expensive watch that seemed at odds with his otherwise casual appearance. "Janice," he smiled broadly, arms outstretched for a hug I didn't reciprocate. His smile faltered as he lowered his arms. "You look great, really great." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing to a table in the corner. "Shall we?" Derek chatted amicably through 2 cups of coffee, asking about my business, complimenting my entrepreneurial spirit and dropping casual references to his own work with our father. He mentioned Amanda's children, now teenagers, and his own recent divorce. Information that might have mattered to me years ago, but now felt like news about distant acquaintances. What he didn't do was apologize. Not once did he acknowledge abandoning me when I was at my lowest, cutting me off completely for 7 years, or the cruel words spoken at that last family dinner. Instead, he pivoted toward the real reason for his sudden reappearance. "Dad's been thinking about you," he said, stirring a 3rd packet of sugar into his coffee. "We all have family dinner this Sunday. Amanda's making her lasagna just like old times." "Why now?" I asked directly. 7 years, Derek. 7 years without a call, text, or Christmas card. Now suddenly everyone's thinking about me. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We made mistakes. Dad was going through some stuff back then. But your family, you've always been family." "I wasn't family when I needed help," I pointed out. "I wasn't family when I was sleeping in my car." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "You never told us it was that bad, you never asked." Silence fell between us. Through the cafe window, I could see Millerville's Main Street, the hardware store where I'd landed my first client, the renovated theater where we hosted community marketing workshops, the intersection where the annual Harvest Festival took place. This was my community now. These people had accepted me when I had nothing to offer but determination. "How's Dad's business doing?" I asked suddenly. Derek's expression flickered momentarily before he shrugged. "Same as everyone, economy's tough, we get by." But his too casual tone and the way his fingers tapped nervously against his cup told a different story. My marketing career had taught me to read people, to spot the unspoken message behind practiced phrases. "I'll think about dinner," I said finally, "but I need time." "Don't take too long," Derek stood, dropping a 20 on the table, though our coffee had cost less than $10. "Family should stick together, right?" After he left, David came over and sat across from me. That looked intense. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "That was my brother. Haven't seen him since before I moved here. And judging by your face, you're not thrilled about the reunion." "Something's off," I admitted. "He shows up out of nowhere, acts like nothing happened, then invites me to family dinner. It doesn't make sense." Later that evening, I did something I should have done immediately. I looked up Marshall Construction online. What I found confirmed my suspicions. The company website was outdated, with broken links and services still priced at 2019 rates. Their social media hadn't been updated in months. A business review site showed declining ratings and customer complaints about unfinished projects. More telling were 3 legal notices in the county public records, 2 supplier liens, and a pending lawsuit from a former client claiming breach of contract. My father's business was failing, possibly headed for bankruptcy. I closed my laptop and called Betty. "Can you come over? I need to talk through something." 20 minutes later, we sat on my porch swing, glasses of iced tea in hand, as I recounted Derek's visit and my subsequent research. "You think they want money," Betty stated plainly. "It wasn't a question. I think they saw that magazine article and figured I could bail them out," I agreed. "Why else break the silence now? The question is," Betty fixed me with her librarian stare, "what are you going to do about it?" I considered the question carefully. Part of me, a small wounded part, still yearned for reconciliation for the family I had once believed in. But the stronger part, the self I'd built through hardship and determination, recognized the danger in opening that door. Nothing. I decided finally, I'm going to do nothing. If they want to make amends, that starts with acknowledging what they did, not pretending it never happened. I declined the dinner invitation via text message. Derek responded with a string of messages, each more insistent than the last, culminating in one that made my blood run cold. Dad says, "You owe this to the family. Remember who raised you." I remembered, all right. I also remembered who hadn't been there when I truly needed them. What I didn't know then was that Derek's appearance was just the opening move in a calculated game, one where my home and hard-won security were the ultimate prizes. Had I understood what was coming, perhaps I would have prepared differently. But some betrayals are so profound they exceed even our darkest expectations. The private investigator's office was located above the town's only dry cleaner, accessible by a narrow staircase that creaked with each step. Tanya Rivera had come highly recommended by Miguel, who'd used her services during a complicated adoption process. She's discreet, thorough, and doesn't judge, he'd assured me. If something's going on with your family, she'll find it. After Derek's increasingly pushy messages and 2 hang-up calls from unknown numbers that caller ID later revealed belonged to my father, I decided professional help was warranted. My instincts screamed that something larger than a simple reunion attempt was underway. Tanya was a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She took notes as I explained the situation, my history with my family, their sudden reappearance, and my suspicions about their motives. "So they cut you off completely when you lost your job," she summarized. "Then ignored you for 7 years until they saw you were successful again. Now your brother's pushing for reconnection while their business is failing. That's about it," I confirmed. "I just want to know what I'm dealing with before I decide how to respond." "Smart," she nodded. "People show their true intentions through actions, not words. Give me a week." True to her word, Tanya called exactly 7 days later. "We need to meet my office. 400. When I arrived, she had a folder waiting. "You might want to sit down for this," she advised, sliding it across her desk. Inside was evidence more damning than I'd anticipated. First came financial documents showing Marshall Construction was indeed on the verge of bankruptcy. My father had taken out second and third mortgages on his house. Derek had maxed out multiple credit cards. There were gambling receipts from casinos in 3 states, all in my father's name. "Your dad has a serious gambling problem," Tanya explained. "Started about 3 years ago, according to my sources. He's been using company funds to cover personal losses. But the financial troubles were just the beginning." Tanya had uncovered emails between my father, Derek, and Amanda discussing me, and more specifically my property in calculating terms. One email from my father to my siblings read, "Janice has that house free and clear. Property values in that area have tripled since Ruth bought it. If we can get her to sign it over to the family trust I'm setting up, we could leverage it to save the business." Another from Amanda suggested, "We need to play the family card hard." She was always the sentimental one. "Derek, you go first since you were closest to her. Dad, you should wait until she softened up." Most disturbing was a draft document my father had prepared. A property transfer agreement that would put my house into a family trust, controlled by him as trustee, with language that would essentially give him complete control over whether to sell it. "There's more," Tanya said grimly. "Your sister Amanda has already approached Eagle Development about your property. They're interested in the entire block for a new condominium project." She represented herself as a co-owner. "She what?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "It gets worse. I found posts on your father's Facebook page, visible only to extended family, claiming that you abandoned them years ago when his business hit a rough patch. He's portrayed himself as the wounded party, you as the ungrateful daughter." The final document in the folder was a draft of a legal letter challenging Aunt Ruth's will, claiming she wasn't of sound mind when she left me her property and suggesting undue influence on my part. "They haven't filed this," Tanya clarified. "But they've consulted with an attorney about the possibility." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money or a desperate attempt to save a failing business. This was a coordinated campaign to manipulate me, to steal what I'd built, to rewrite history itself. "What should I do?" I asked finally. "First, secure your property legally," Tanya advised. "See a good estate attorney. Second, document everything, every contact, every message. Third, don't engage with them without witnesses present." I followed her advice. Meeting with Caroline Winters, the most respected estate attorney in the county, she reviewed Aunt Ruth's will, the property deed, and the evidence Tanya had gathered. "Your aunt's will is ironclad," she assured me. She had a medical evaluation just before making the changes, specifically to prevent this kind of challenge. "As for your family's plans, what they're attempting borders on fraud." Caroline helped me create a revocable trust of my own, placing the house and business assets under its protection. She also drafted cease and desist letters to Eagle Development, informing them that Amanda had no legal interest in my property. "Be prepared," Caroline warned as I left her office. "People who feel entitled to what you have rarely give up easily. They may escalate when their initial plan fails." Her prediction proved accurate sooner than I expected. That weekend, a certified letter arrived from Marshall Legal Services, a firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a formal demand that I return family property wrongfully obtained from Aunt Ruth, along with vague threats of legal action. A quick search revealed that Marshall Legal Services wasn't a law firm at all, just a letterhead my father had created to intimidate me. The letter held no legal weight, but its intent was clear. They weren't backing down. With Tanya and Caroline's guidance, I implemented a protection plan. I installed security cameras around my property. I informed my employees and close friends about the situation, asking them to report any contact from my family members. I documented every call, text, and letter in a detailed log. What I couldn't prepare for was the emotional toll. Each new discovery was like reopening a wound I thought had healed. The family I'd once loved, who I'd grieved losing, hadn't just abandoned me. They were actively plotting against me. The calculated nature of their actions suggested they'd never truly valued me as anything more than a resource to be used. One evening, as Betty and I sorted through more documents Tanya had provided, my elderly friend sat down her reading glasses with a sigh. "You know what breaks my heart about this?" she asked. "They have no idea who you've become. They see your success, your property, what they can take from you, but they don't see you, how hard you've worked, how much you've grown, how many people you've helped in this town. They don't deserve to call you family." Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about standing up for the life I'd built, the person I'd become despite, or perhaps because of their rejection. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, they arrived on my doorstep unannounced. My father, Derek, Amanda, and a man in a suit clutching a portfolio. The confrontation I'd been preparing for had finally arrived. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30 on a Tuesday evening. I was in my home office finishing a client proposal when the security camera alert pinged on my phone. The sight of them standing on my porch, William, Derek, Amanda, and a stranger in a suit, sent adrenaline coursing through my system. For a moment I considered not answering. Then I remembered Caroline's advice: control the narrative, don't let them think they've intimidated you. I smoothed my blouse, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Janice, my father, stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. At 68 he was still tall and imposing, though his formerly dark hair had turned completely silver. "It's time we talked." "I don't recall inviting you," I replied evenly, blocking the entrance. "And I'm in the middle of work. Work can wait," he dismissed with the same authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood. "Family business can't." Derek and Amanda flanked him like lieutenants. My sister looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to another, while Derek maintained an expression of practiced concern. The stranger hung back, clutching a leather portfolio. "This is Graham Lawson," my father gestured to the man. "He's with Eagle Development. We have a proposition that benefits everyone." The audacity was breathtaking. They hadn't even bothered with pretense or pleasantries, just launched straight into their scheme. Against my better judgment, I allowed them in. Better to confront this directly than let it fester. As they filed past me into the living room, their reactions to my renovated home were impossible to miss. Derek's eyebrows raised at the custom built-ins lining the walls. Amanda ran her fingers over the marble countertops visible from the entryway. My father's gaze swept across the space, calculating, assessing. "Quite a place you've made for yourself," he remarked, the compliment undercut by his tone suggesting surprise that I was capable of such achievement. "Thank you," I said, remaining standing while they settled uninvited onto my furniture. Now what's so urgent? It requires an ambush. Graham cleared his throat, opening his portfolio. Miss Marshall, Eagle Development is prepared to make a very generous offer for this property. We're developing the entire block into upscale condominiums and your parcel is key to our plans. I'm not selling, I stated firmly. And I believe your company already received notification from my attorney that my sister has no authority to negotiate on my behalf. Amanda had the grace to flush red. Graham looked uncomfortable. That's where you're wrong. My father interjected. This isn't just your property to sell or keep. This house belonged to a Williams, not a Marshall. It's family property. Aunt Ruth left it to me specifically, I countered. Her will was very clear, she wasn't in her right mind. Derek jumped in. Dad visited her at the care facility. She was confused, barely knew who he was. This blatant lie made my blood boil. That's interesting considering she told me Dad hadn't visited in years. And the medical evaluation performed the day she updated her will confirm she was completely competent. My father's expression darkened. We're not here to debate Ruth's mental state. We're here to resolve this situation like family. Like family, I repeated incredulously. The way you resolved things when I lost my job and you told me my problems weren't yours. When you excluded me from every gathering, when you cut me off completely for 7 years. Ancient history. My father waved dismissively. Everyone goes through rough patches. Rough patches, my voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. I lived in my car, I lost everything, not one of you even checked to see if I was alive. And look at you now, Amanda interjected, gesturing around the room. Obviously you didn't need our help, you're doing better than any of us. Her words were meant as a dismissal of my suffering, but inadvertently highlighted the truth. I had rebuilt without them. I had succeeded despite their abandonment, not because of it. Graham, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the family drama, attempted to redirect the conversation. Perhaps we could focus on the offer. Eagle Development is prepared to pay $850,000 for the property, well above market value. The figure momentarily stunned me. When Aunt Ruth purchased the house decades ago, it had cost perhaps $70,000. Even with the renovations and rising property values, I hadn't realized its worth had increased so dramatically. Before I could respond, my father leaned forward. We've already signed preliminary paperwork with Eagle Janice. They've paid a non-refundable deposit based on our assurance that the family would deliver this property. You what? I stared at him in disbelief. We signed as the Williams Family Trust, Derek explained as if this clarified everything. Dad's the trustee representing the extended family interests, a trust that doesn't include this property, I pointed out. You've committed fraud, only if you refuse to cooperate. My father's voice took on a threatening edge. Sign the property over to the trust, take a fair portion of the proceeds and everyone wins. Fight us and we'll contest Ruth's will. It'll be ugly, public and expensive. The calculated manipulation was stunning. First the emotional appeal to family, then the legal threats, now financial intimidation. They'd planned this meticulously, counting on either my sentimentality or my fear to give them what they wanted. Why, I asked, looking at each of them. Why now, after all these years, what changed? The momentary silence was broken by Amanda's inadvertent glance toward our father, a tell that confirmed what I already suspected. The business is failing, I stated. It wasn't a question, and Dad needs cash. My father's face flushed with anger. Marshall Construction has weathered worse storms. This is about family legacy, about doing what's right. Is it right to gamble away your company's funds? I asked quietly. His expression changed from anger to shock. Derek and Amanda exchanged alarmed glances. Yes, I know about the casinos, I continued. The credit card debt, the second and third mortgages, I know everything. You had us investigated. Derek sounded outraged, as if I was the one crossing boundaries. After 7 years of silence, my brother suddenly appears when my business is featured in a magazine, then starts pushing for family reunions while asking pointed questions about my property. Yes, I had you investigated, and thank goodness I did. My father's shock transformed into cold fury. You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. Always had to do things your way. Well, here's something your investigation might have missed. I raised you. I put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe me. The entitlement in his voice was staggering. I owe you for doing the basic duty of a parent. That debt was paid when I graduated college, built a career, and never asked you for a dime, even when I was homeless. We're getting off track, Graham interrupted nervously. The offer from Eagle is time-sensitive. We need an answer within 48 hours. The answer is no, I stated firmly. I'm not selling and I'm not signing anything over to any trust. This is my home legally and morally. My father stood abruptly, looming over me. This isn't over. Well, contest the will. Well, sue for our share. You think you can stand against the entire family? What family? I asked quietly. The people who should have been my family abandoned me when I needed them most. The person who acted like true family was Aunt Ruth, a woman I barely knew who showed me more compassion in 3 weeks than you have in my entire life. We're done here, my father growled. Graham, let's go. But as they moved toward the door, my father turned back with one final threat. We'll be back with lawyers. Enjoy this house while you can. When we're done, you'll have nothing, just like you deserved 7 years ago. In that moment, something inside me broke and reformed. The last lingering hope that reconciliation might be possible, that there was anything worth salvaging in these relationships, evaporated. Get out, I said calmly, reaching for my phone. Get out now, or I'm calling 911 to report trespassers. You wouldn't dare, Amanda gasped. We're your family. I didn't respond with words. Instead, I dialed the 3 digits and put the phone to my ear, my gaze locked with my father's. His face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. This is 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice came through clearly in the sudden silence. I need to report trespassers who are refusing to leave my property and making threats, I said calmly, giving my address. Please send officers immediately. They fled before the first patrol car arrived, but not before my father's parting words. This isn't over, not by a long shot. As I watched them drive away from my front window, I realized he was right about one thing. It wasn't over, but for the first time I was fully prepared for whatever came next. They had shown their true colors not just once but twice. There would not be a third opportunity. The officer who responded took my statement, documented their threats, and advised me on obtaining a restraining order. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. Family disputes are the worst, he said sympathetically. But for what it's worth, you did the right thing. Some people will take and take until there's nothing left, if you let them. I thanked him, closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come, not tears of regret or loss but of release. I had faced my worst fear, confronting my family, and survived. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, not theirs. Little did I know that their desperate attempt would backfire so spectacularly, bringing a resolution I could never have anticipated. The aftermath of that confrontation unfolded more rapidly than I could have imagined. Within 24 hours, I had filed for an emergency restraining order against all 3 family members, using the security camera footage of their threats as evidence. Judge Harriman granted it immediately, citing their pattern of escalating harassment and attempted coercion. Caroline, my attorney, moved swiftly to counter their legal maneuvers before they could begin. She sent formal notices to every law firm in a 100-mile radius, detailing my family's fraudulent representation to Eagle Development and their attempt to sell property they didn't own. It's a small legal community, she explained. Once word gets around that they misrepresented ownership to a major developer, no reputable attorney will touch their case. Eagle Development, upon receiving documentation proving my sole ownership and the fraudulent nature of my family's claims, not only withdrew their offer, but filed suit against William, Derek, and Amanda for misrepresentation and damages related to their non-refundable deposit. They've built their whole financial rescue plan on selling your house, Tanya reported after another round of investigation. Without that, Marshall Construction will likely file for bankruptcy within 60 days. The most unexpected development came from my cousin Tyler, who called out of the blue one Tuesday morning. Janice, it's Tyler. I don't know if you remember me, but we're cousins on your dad's side. I remember you, I said cautiously. It's been a long time. Look, I heard what Uncle William tried to do with your house. It's all over the family grapevine. I just wanted you to know not all of us agree with him. Tyler's call opened a floodgate. Over the next week, I received messages from 3 other cousins, an aunt on my father's side and my mother's brother, who I hadn't seen since her funeral. Each expressed similar sentiments. They'd believed my father's version of events for years, but his recent actions had raised questions. They'd heard about my success in Millerville, my community involvement, my business achievements. "Your mother would be proud of you," my uncle said during our call. "She always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone in the family." Their support was unexpected and healing, but I maintained careful boundaries. Years of abandonment couldn't be erased by belated recognition, however welcome. The final blow to my father's plans came when his gambling problem became public knowledge. A local newspaper ran an article about Marshall Construction's financial troubles, including allegations from former employees about misappropriated funds and Williams' frequent unexplained absences to visit casinos in neighboring states. 2 weeks after their ambush visit to my home, I received notification that Eagle Development's lawsuit had been settled out of court. My father had agreed to personal liability for the company's deposit, further crippling his finances. Marshall Construction filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy the following day. Derek called once during this period, his voice strained and desperate. "This is destroying Dad," he said. The business was everything to him. "He destroyed it himself," I replied calmly, and then tried to take what I built to cover his mistakes. "Those were his choices, Derek, not mine. We're still family," he protested weakly. "No," I corrected him gently, "we're relatives. Family stands by each other through hard times. Family doesn't appear only when they want something. You taught me that distinction very clearly 7 years ago." After that, silence. No more threats, no more demands, no more pretense of reconciliation. The restraining order ensured they couldn't approach my home or business. Their legal options had evaporated. The story they'd constructed of the ungrateful daughter who abandoned the family had unraveled in the face of documented facts and their own transparent greed. In the months that followed, I channeled my energy into positive directions. The emotional clarity that came from the final confrontation with my birth family freed something within me. I expanded Phoenix marketing, hiring 3 more employees and opening a second office in the neighboring town. But more importantly, I found ways to transform my painful experience into help for others. I partnered with the local women's shelter to create a financial literacy program for survivors of domestic abuse. Many were rebuilding their lives from scratch just as I had done. I established the Ruth Williams Second Chance Scholarship at the community college, providing funds for women returning to education after personal or financial setbacks. The first recipient was a 42-year-old former restaurant manager who'd lost everything in a divorce and was retraining as a paralegal. Betty suggested we start a monthly dinner group for people without families, which quickly evolved into the Sunday gathering, a rotating potluck that became a lifeline for many in our community who lacked traditional family support. What began with 5 people around my dining table grew to over 30 regulars meeting in different homes each week. On the first anniversary of the confrontation, I received an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a newspaper clipping about my scholarship program with a yellow sticky note attached that simply read, "Your mother would be proud. I am too, Ruth." The handwriting wasn't Aunt Ruth's, of course. She had been gone for years. But someone, perhaps one of my cousins or even Amanda in a rare moment of clarity, had chosen to acknowledge the path I'd taken. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned shouldn't be rebuilt. But I kept the note in my desk drawer as a reminder that growth can come from the most barren soil. That strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. This Thanksgiving, my house will overflow with my chosen family. Betty, now 85 and still sharp as ever, my employees and their families, neighbors who have become friends, clients who have become confidants. The scholarship recipients who now mentor others will gather around tables pushed together in the renovated living room, sharing dishes and stories and laughter. If there's an empty chair where my birth family might have sat, it no longer aches with absence. Instead, it represents a choice, my choice, to fill my life with people who demonstrate love through actions, not merely blood ties or convenient appearances. The true meaning of family isn't found in shared DNA or last names. It's built through consistent presence, through showing up in both celebration and crisis, through actions that say you matter even when words fail. Sometimes the most loving families are the ones we create after learning what family shouldn't be. My journey from corporate success to homeless desperation to rebuilt prosperity taught me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or property values. It's counted in the people who stand beside you when you have nothing material to offer. It's valued in authenticity, in relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation or advantage. 12 years ago, I lost a family who proved they never truly deserved the title. But in that loss, I found something far more precious. The strength to build a life on my own terms, the wisdom to recognize genuine connection, and the courage to stand firm against those who would take what I'd built through determination and hard work. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the permission to let go of toxic relationships, even when they come wrapped in the package of family. Sometimes the bravest act of self-love is dialing those three numbers 911 and saying no to those who would diminish us for their benefit. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between blood ties and your own well-being? How did you handle family members who only appeared when they needed something from you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more content about resilience and rebuilding, and share with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes creating boundaries with family is the healthiest choice you can make. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you're never truly alone when you stay true to yourself.